pleased to welcome everyone here today. My name is Dr. Philip Phillips, and I'm the Associate Dean of the University Honors College, and this is our lecture series on letters. Our speaker today is Dr. Mary Hoffschwelle, who is Professor of History and the Director of our Quality Enhancement Program, MT Engage, here at MTSU. She earned her MA degree from the College of William and Mary and spent the first part of her career working in the museum field at Colonial Williamsburg, the Montana Historical Society, and Oakland's Historic House Museum in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So she's been all over the place. Her publications include Rebuilding the Rural Southern Community, Reformers, Schools, and Homes in Tennessee, 1900 to 1930, the Rosenwald Schools of the American South, and Preserving Rosenwald Schools. Her current research focuses on the jeans teachers in Alabama, which she'll tell you about. She recently published an article about jeans teacher A. Wells Henderson in the Journal of Southern History and an article in the Tennessee Historical Quarterly about federal impact aid and black public education in Milan, Tennessee. Right. Her topic today is Narrating Race, Gender, and Professional Identity in Jim Crow, Alabama. Please join me in welcoming our speaker.
Well, thank you, Dr. Phillips, and my thanks to all of you for spending your afternoon listening to me. In fact, I want to get all of my acknowledgments out at the beginning. We usually leave these to the end, but I do appreciate the work of the Honors College staff and faculty and all of the students whom I've had the pleasure of working with over many years. I'm drawing my talk today from several different archival collections. So Dr. Phillips will be referring you to the Albert Gore Research Center here on campus, which is also our university archives. And I've spent a lot of time at university archives like that at Fisk University, Tuskegee University, and Alabama State University, as well as at the Alabama Department of Archives and History. So today I'm going to be drawing on a number of historic documents that date back to the early years of the 20th century. So they're roughly a century old now. So I want to make it clear when you see words on the screen, and I've actually reprinted some of these letters on one side of the handout that you should have. All of the quoted material does appear as it does in the original. You might see some words or letters, words in brackets. I've done that for clarity. And also we'll be using historical terminology here that is very much out of date today. And I only use that when it is necessary in a quotation or to properly situate something in a historical context. So this afternoon, I want to say a little bit about why letters are important for me as historical sources in my work on jeans teachers, especially understanding the Agnes of our talk today, A. Wells Henderson. So I'm going to talk about that, then who the people are in the letters that we're going to be examining. Then we'll examine 3 episodes in the professional career of A. Wells Henderson to get some insight from the letters into what she was experiencing and what that might tell us. So much of my work as a historian focuses on the history of education in the early 20th century South, and in particular education by and of African Americans in public schools in southern states in this era of Jim Crow, of legalized racial discrimination and white supremacy. And the context that we're operating in literally and figuratively looks like this. So I've been looking at all of the different state agencies and teachers groups were involved in trying to redress some of these situations, and also the work of outsiders, philanthropists primarily, who are very interested in, as they saw it, reforming and uplifting southern states. Because while we are all familiar with universal public education, that every child can attend a public school, in southern states, that's really only a century old. And high school did not become a really common experience until the 1920s. So we're only 90 years away from that. And that was quite different from what had already happened in other parts of the United States. So I'm looking at how the public school systems came to be, and then how they came to be as racialized and gendered spaces and professions in the early 20th century South. Today I'm focusing on Jeans teachers, and so who are these people? Well, the name Jeans teacher comes from the Anna T. Jeans Foundation, technically known as the Negro Rural School Fund. Anna Jeans was the last survivor of a very wealthy family in Philadelphia. And so she'd become interested in what was happening in the South. Because of her religious beliefs, she was a real advocate for what today we would call social justice. And she saw other philanthropists being active in Southern education, and she came to be very concerned about what she called the small rural or country schools. What was happening for African American children in those tiny schools in rural communities? When she died, she left a considerable amount of her fortune to create the Anna T. Jeans Foundation. And this foundation was unique in its time in that it had an integrated board of trustees. So this is a partial list of the board of trustees. You'll see a number of famous names like William Howard Taft, but Booker T. Washington, the famous leader of Tuskegee Institute. We'll see a good bit of his school today. Also a very controversial leader in his own time as he was today for some of his views. He was a founding trustee. He was also the chair of the executive committee of the Anna T. Jeans Foundation. You see other African American educators and business leaders like Robert Russell Moton, who would succeed Washington at Tuskegee, and from Nashville, James C. Napier. This is the only philanthropic foundation of its kind that has both white and black members of its board of trustees, the only one. It'll take until the 1940s for others to begin to desegregate their board of trustees of these philanthropic foundations. So the primary function of the Jeans Fund, after a few years of trying to figure out what their function actually would be, came to be to support the work of teachers who were variously called Jeans teachers, Jeans supervising industrial teachers, and then Jeans supervisors. And word of clarification here, the term industrial in education at this time, it really refers to what we would call vocational education. It's really not about going to work in a factory. But the Jeans teachers, their job description was unlimited. As you can see here, they have to teach simple industrial work, simple vocational classes, helping the regular school teachers, raising money for the extension of school terms, because school systems did not fully fund the school year for black schools, and so often their schools ran months shorter than white schools ran during a school year. So parents had to raise money in order for their children to continue to get a full school year. They are working on building new school buildings, improving, supplementing teachers' salaries, getting school materials, you name it. In fact, Jeans teachers had this famous saying that their job was to do the next needed thing. Whatever needed to be done, that's what they should do. The role model for Jeans teachers was Virginia Estelle Randolph, who ran a school right outside Richmond, Virginia, and then began on her own to develop a system in which she would support other teachers around her in their vocational work. and doing also all of that fundraising that you saw was part of the Jeans teacher's job. So actually she was doing that first, and the Jeans Fund, when it came along, they adopted her plan of work and then offered matching grants to county boards of education. If you put up half the money for a Jeans teacher's salary, you can hire a Jeans teacher. We'll pay the rest of her salary. We'll pay some travel expenses for her, and she will go around the county visiting all the schools promoting this industrial or vocational and sort of fundraising, community organizing task. And I should point out, all Jeans teachers all are African American. Almost all were women. And then after a while, as this spread, then they began to hire state supervisors for the Jeans teachers themselves. Over time, Jeans teachers became what we would call today supervisors of curriculum, supervisors of instruction. And in many cases, they were the de facto superintendent of black schools. White county superintendents would just put off the job of actually, keeping track of what was happening in black schools to the Jeans teacher for the county. So here is what these kinds of tasks spelled out as: endless visits to schools, and an early picture of a Jeans teacher at work in a school building in Macon County, Alabama, where Tuskegee Institute is located. Now, in doing my research, I have to look at a lot of published work by philanthropic foundations and state boards of education, like those you've just seen. And a lot of the actual correspondence that I've looked at is really sort of business correspondence. And I've turned over, I don't know how many pieces of paper that were nothing but forms that teachers had to fill out even then. And we actually have to thank people of the early 20th century for the idea that education should consist of lots of form filling. But some of the correspondence is a little more interesting. And you could think of it really as the way that we are exchanging emails in our offices today all the time. Sometimes it's just simple work notices, and sometimes we could be quite chatty. So we have, this letter, it's just a narrative version of a form, right? But other times people are just talking to each other, and I enjoyed this sort of old school emoji here that a Jeans teacher inserted in her letter. But let's say a little bit about then why letters are important and who these people are. Because as I'm sure you've heard over and over again, when you look at a piece of correspondence, you have to think very carefully about who the author is and the perspective and the context out of which they write and the purpose for their letter. You also have to think about the audience that they're trying to communicate with, because they are aiming directly at that audience. But as we go through, I would like us to add to that the sort of the networks that each of those people are involved in, the writer and then the recipient of the letter. What are the networks that they are plugged into and that they are actually going to try to leverage to achieve their goals? So in the handout, and I thought you would need to sort of keep track of who these folks are. And the Anna T. Jeans Fund was headed up by a man named James Hardy Dillard, who worked out of Charlottesville, Virginia. At Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama, founded by Booker T. Washington. At the time that we're looking at it today, it is now headed by Robert Russell Moton. Underneath them is Clinton J. Calloway, who was their director of extension. He's an outreach person. And he has two employees whom we'll encounter, William J. Rakestraw and Booker T. Washington, Jr., usually referred to by his nickname Baker. At the Alabama Department of Education, we'll be hearing mostly from Joseph Lambert and a little bit from James Sibley. The Negro rural school agent at the State Department of Education was always a man and always white. But he's in charge of seeing what happens for the state in black schools that are public schools. Then the state Jeans supervisors, R.A. Wells Henderson will become one. These were the first black women professionals to hold official positions in state departments of education in the South. And then a building agent will encounter Marcus Griffin. At the county level, you have your county superintendent of education. We'll be looking at Elizabeth Carruthers Fawcett. She was the first female county superintendent in Autauga County, Alabama. And we'll encounter A. Wells Henderson starting her Jane's teacher career there. And we'll meet some teachers like Ethel Calloway, Sarah Woodall, and community members like Reverend Hargrove. So A. Wells Henderson, the Agnes of my title. This is how she usually signed her correspondence. This is a form letter that she's sending out to Jane's teachers all across the state of Alabama. Sincerely, A. Wells Henderson. And then when she's in a hurry or in a PS, she always just uses her initials. And she always identified herself as Mrs. A. Wells Henderson, described herself as a widow. But April Fools, Agnes was not her name, and she was not a widow. So I've seen her name listed every which way. But she was born at probably Ada Wells in 1874 in Pickens County. At some point, she was in Birmingham, or came to Birmingham, Alabama, an industrial city, where she married Cook Henderson. I'm not sure how, but she and Cook Henderson came to the attention of the African Methodist Episcopal Church as likely prospects to have college educations and for Cook to become a minister. So they were sent off to Wilberforce University in Ohio. This is the oldest higher education institution for African Americans in the nation to this day. And Cook Henderson earned his theological degree there. Abby Wells Henderson earns her Bachelor of Science degree. Then they moved to Alabama. He preaches in Demopolis for a while until his appointment as president of Payne School in Selma, Alabama. And we know that the two of them are there together. And a 1902 history, actually, of the African and Methodist Episcopal Church in Alabama talks about Cook Henderson being in Demopolis and describes Abby Wells Henderson as being a great scholar with a beautiful character. But then something happens, because Cook Henderson just disappears. And he doesn't show up again until he's in Casper, Wyoming, where he's a minister and he's married to a different woman. So Abby stays behind in Selma. She is lady principal, that's like the dean of female students, and a teacher at Payne University. The school became a university until 1909. Then she shows up next as the principal of the Prattville Colored School. And Prattville is a small industrial city north and west of Montgomery, Alabama. Then she'll become a Jeans teacher and the state Jeans supervisor. So not a widow, not Agnes. So how does all this happen? Well, let's look at some of these episodes I said we'd examine. So there's a different one of these letters on the back of your handouts. But in some of these letters, A. Wells Henderson describes herself, and sometimes other people are writing about her. So keep in mind what I said about networks. So this is a letter from the County Superintendent of Education, Elizabeth Carruthers, or Mrs. R.L. Fawcett. She's writing to Clinton Calloway at Tuskegee Institute and talking about A. Wells Henderson, doing a splendid work of exceptional ability, sound educational ideas, unlimited energy, and a great love for her people and the work. And she writes the same stuff to the state Negro school agents. So it's very interesting that for the rest of A. Wells Henderson's professional career, she will consider Elizabeth Fawcett to be her best ally, the person that she felt closest to as a professional. And of course, both of them were highly educated professional women. Elizabeth Fawcett had a degree from Peabody College in Nashville. But there's a big power dynamic at work here, though, right? Because as county superintendent and as a white woman, Fawcett has a lot of power over Henderson. And so not only did they both recognize that, but apparently they both used it for each other. And Fawcett doesn't mind leveraging her own power to vouch for Henderson anytime it's necessary. And to anybody. necessary. Here's a little bit of Henderson herself talking to the state Negro school agent about what she's doing. And this is just as she is getting ready to start her work as a jeans teacher. She's been working in the summer to sort of get ready for vocational education. She gets out now to every community. She wants to get to know the prevailing conditions. And then when she officially starts her work as jeans teacher, formulate plans, make out a schedule to do the greatest good to the greatest number. And keep that phrasing in mind for later. Now, Henderson would have loved these illustrations. They come from a 1930s book, but it has a chapter about jeans teachers, and the audience for this book were children. They're teaching about community leaders. And one illustration says, oh, the supervisor always knows what to do. And then when she comes to visit, she almost preached. Wells Henderson preached everywhere she went. She might be divorced from a minister, but she always is preaching about education and professional identity. And she certainly thinks she always knows what to do. But that's not what other people think. So jeans teachers, they were disruptive figures in local communities and small communities. They were outsiders who came in and said, hey, teacher, I'm going to show you how to do things differently, and you have to follow my instructions. And they're also making inroads on teachers' relationships with parents and other community leaders. So sometimes those teachers pushed back. Here we see C.L. Rhodes. He's writing to William Rakestraw, who worked for Clinton Calloway at Tuskegee. He's not writing to the county superintendent, and you can see why. He says, well, here's my school, I'm describing it. We're working on trying to build a new school. I'm trying to get them involved in industrial education. Mrs. Henderson was here, and she got them to deed property to the state to build this school. And he says, we're going to have some rallies. He wants Rakestraw to come because, he says, I want to see how Henderson's going to handle this. Because she stands between me and the county superintendent and the county board. I am afraid of being cut to death with the county officials. I can't afford to write everything I know. So he is quite dismissive of Henderson. At other times, he will talk about how badly her fundraising activities go. She says, well, she came and Henderson now is getting cut to death by some of the women in the audience. She came here to cut my head off. And she does this in front of the county superintendent and her husband, who was a banking official in the community, and then Clinton Calloway came in the middle of it. So this really put Rhodes on the spot. And he says, well, but Henderson, none of the people would respond to her. She came with the wrong spirit, as she usually does. She's trying to take the credit. And then she actually verbally threatened his job. So if you people in the community think you're getting Rhodes back as a teacher, think again, unless you step up and do what I'm telling you to do. Oh, this is, of course, just according to Rhodes. So now I have to say, these kinds of situations for jeans teachers, they're not unusual. I've read a lot of letters by jeans teachers talking about the problems they ran into from their perspective. And I'm sure there were a lot of parents and teachers who were talking to each other about the problems that jeans teachers taught. But A. Wells Henderson is not just your typical jeans teacher coming in as an outside authority. She doesn't take anybody brooking any kind of challenge to her. And she has some very powerful allies, remember? Elizabeth Fawcett. So when other teachers write to the State Department of Education complaining about Henderson, and the state Negro school agent says, hey, have you heard about this? He says, this was a surprise. I thought everybody liked her. Well, of course, what that tells you is he has no contact with black teachers and black communities. He sits in Montgomery in an office. But Fawcett says, oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's just as some people are trying to cause trouble. Other people don't necessarily agree, and this is episode 2, and it's one that threatened to get way out of control. So Reverend William D. Hargrove is an AME minister in Otagoville, and given Wells Henderson's history with AME ministers, they might not have gotten along anyway, but as you see, he's riding over to Tuskegee, again to Rakestraw, with whom he's cooperating on other issues. She's trying to fool the farmers, not making much headway. And what Hargrove wants to do is to invite the head of Tuskegee Institute, Robert Russell Moten, to come and speak at his church. And this would have been the 3rd time in 3 years that Moten spoke in Otagoville. This is a poster from his speech there in 1918. So Rakestraw is trying to help Hargrove with this. And then word gets to Rakestraw's boss at Tuskegee, Clinton Calloway. He turns around and writes to A. Wells Henderson. Says, what's up? Moten's coming? What's going on? What do you think about this? And she writes back, well, I've been wanting to talk to you about this. And she has a long letter in which she describes some situations she was in a year ago with Hargrove and Booker T. Washington, Jr. They were supposed to be working together to get a new school built, and instead it became a power struggle. Who was going to be in charge and get all the credit? And Hargrove had started it, then it went nowhere, so Henderson, she says, she stepped in and she got everything going, and she says that's when Hargrove wanted to get back in. She paid him no notice. So he went and got Booker T. Washington, Jr. They get her in, as you see here, a private room. And Mr. Washington says, if I don't make Hargrove the chairman of the committee, we'd get no money for a Rosenwald school building grant. He said if he said for us not to get any money, we wouldn't get any. His father was the founder of the Jeans Fund that paid me. And so he's in charge. But Henderson says, I went for him. I told him I did not belong to that class of limited workers that believed him the equal of his father. I told him his father was the founder of Tuskegee, but evidently he was not running it. Neither would he run Watauga County. So he says, and she's writing this to Calloway, right? So she's appealing to him. I told him, Calloway's in charge of these school projects. And I would act in the future, as I had in the past, as if Booker T. Washington, Jr. never lived. So that's one thing. She writes, as she continues this letter, she says, but then, we sort of patched it up. And she says, as I had to get on the train to leave town, Booker T. Washington Jr. gave me his arm to help me get into the train car. So it's okay. But Hargrove is another matter. And this is where it gives us some insight into some of the issues that teachers faced. Hargrove, she says, had been at one of her earlier meetings raising money during World War I. She says, I told people if you're going to go over the top on saving stamps and Liberty bonds to win the white man's war, you should show the same enthusiasm for giving to build a school. And so Hargrove turns around and writes letters reporting her as being, somebody who does not support the war effort. And there's even a threat that she'll be put in jail because she could have been charged with sedition. She could have lost her job, her teaching certificate, everything. But she says, actually, this blew over, and Mrs. Fawcett helped her to smooth all of this over. Well, Hargrove and still gets Moten to come, but it's referred to as a rather local affair later on. But she concludes this letter with this wonderful line, these Methodist ministers have fought me to a finish. But she's just hanging on. And she can write that because she's getting ready for her new job as state jeans supervisor. She was being recruited secretly by Joseph S. Lambert, the state agent for Negro schools, to become the new state supervisor for jeans teachers to replace Nanny Butler, who's on your sort of cast of characters. And this is a really interesting set of correspondence that I'm going to use for our episode 3, in which she uses her letters to Lambert to try to articulate what she thinks their professional relationship should be. And again, lots of hierarchy here and very much a racialized and gendered hierarchy, but Henderson's strong personality is going to come through. So in their early correspondence, she always addressed him as Mr. J.S. Lambert, and then she signed off as A. Wells Henderson. And he always replied to her, would address his letters to her as, Mrs. A.W. Henderson, dear madam. But when she becomes, or is getting ready to become the state gene supervisor, she starts addressing him as my dear Mr. Lambert, and then she signs Agnes. And the letter I think that is most revealing is this one, so we'll look at it a little bit closely, because as she's becoming state gene supervisor, she feels the need to explain who she is. As she says, I want you to get the proper perspective as to my fitness. She is a college woman. She has a Bachelor of Science degree. And now she's being converted from this highly academic training. Remember, she is a great scholar and a beautiful character. Now she has to focus on vocational education. But because of that, she thinks that, we need to have this literary part. She means academic training for students and for teachers as well. So she wants to boost up what's going on at county training schools, which are early high schools. Then we can measure up to what other states are doing. And then she says, well, because these other states, they're ahead of us. And Mrs. Fawcett thinks you could be as famous and as well regarded as the Negro school agents in these other states. And I'm going to help you achieve that. So really interesting, I think she starts with sort of a self-disclosure here, but then she pivots around and she offers Lambert the flattery, potential flattery of a white woman, Mrs. Fawcett, but then it comes back to Henderson. I want you to give me every opportunity to make the work the equal of other states. I'm going to help you achieve this. I'm following a Tuskegee woman, remember. The eyes of all are upon me. I am your creature. And so now she's actually, making sure he understands that she thinks he's in charge. She'll do anything she can to make his administration a success. But then at the end of this, that's where she writes, don't write Agnes. Don't write Agnes. It is my nickname, and only my intimate friends know it. She'd given him her name, or what she said was her name, right? At a time when it was common for whites to be extremely disrespectful in how they spoke to black people, no matter the person they're speaking to, what are their achievements, and to always refer to them by their first name, not respectfully as Mr. or Miss or Mrs. And so many black professionals only use their initials to stop white people from doing that. So when she gives him this name, she's almost inviting him to be a friend. You can call me by my first name, but it's not really her first name, right? But he has made the mistake of addressing an envelope to her as Agnes Henderson, and she's like, don't do that. Only my intimate friends know that. And she continues to keep writing to him and signing off as Agnes, but it's clear that she's thinking of this relationship as a close partnership like she had with Elizabeth Fawcett, but it's not going to quite work out that way. She says, well, you need to be sending out instructions to people I'm going to meet with, letting them know I'm coming and who I am and why they should listen to me, right? She says, I'm sorry you didn't tell them. I have to go out without anything that would give me prestige. I have nothing but gab, and I've used it to perfection. She says, I give all my time to my work. I do it the best I can. You still won't tell me exactly what it is you want me to do. I want to be loyal. I want to be trustworthy. And she says, but nobody seems to show a personal interest in me. I'm on the road all of the time. I have no money. But only Mrs. Fawcett has ever really cared for me. So she starts to mush together, conflate the personal and the professional. And when Lambert still never does anything for her, then she goes over his head and writes to the head of the Jeans Fund this long, 6-page letter going on and on and on about the lack of business principles, you name it. James Hardy Dillard gets his letter, he says, okay, he sends her back, oh, thank you. And then he sends the letter, his reply, and another letter to Lambert and says, would you read this and do something about it, please? So she gets a 2-pager from her boss saying, I've given you carte blanche. You can do whatever you want. But that's not what she wanted. And she says to him later, we need to get together. We need to talk about our goals. We need to make a plan and then a schedule, just like she did when she started being a genes teacher. He still never does really that, but he does at least start to send out letters introducing her to other people. And that could show you many more examples of this. She's always careful to guard her professional position. Anytime somebody tries to get in the way of that, like when Marquis Griffin, as the conductor of Teacher Institutes, calls a meeting of genes teachers, she says, no, I should be the person that you turn to do this kind of stuff. And she goes on, Mr. Griffin, how can he understand us? I'm sorry, you haven't trusted me to do this. My duty is to look after my coworkers, which she does. Letter after letter, she talks about the need to take care of her coworkers. For example, one county superintendent writes to her and says, help me find a new genes teacher for my county. I want one that's good looking. And she says, no. She writes to Lambert, we're not doing that. Because we know what this guy has in mind. And genes teachers are extremely vulnerable to sexual assault. They're on the road all the time. And it wasn't unusual in this time period for county superintendents to think that they should get commissions from teachers they gave jobs to and sexual favors from female teachers. So she's very protective of them, and she's always pushing them for new professional achievements. And when there's a rumor going around that she's going to quit, then a group of teachers come together to send a letter to Lambert saying, no, you can't let her go. Yes, she is better educated than we are, but we should hope that somebody who is our boss, our supervisor would be. She has the vision, she has done it. Now, that did not save Agnes Wells Henderson. Lambert had gotten tired of her, and he started to replace her secretly, just like he had recruited her when he already had somebody else in this job to take over. And so she's out as state genes supervisor in 1923. So what does all this tell us? Well, I wish I could wrap her all up and tie a nice, neat, tidy bow around her, but I think she's way too complicated for that. For every time that you're cheering her on because she's trying to advance the professional status and opportunities for professional black women like herself, then she's turning around and she's totally self-involved in what she is saying about herself and wanting people to pay her this close personal regard. So she's unable to really build the kind of alliances and the constituencies that would have made her the figure she wanted to be. But I don't think it's a problem that she has those limitations at all. In fact, I think her limitations help us to understand what other women like her were up against, that there were just so few opportunities for highly educated professional women who are African American in Alabama and the South at this time, and in fact nationwide. There's just not a place for a woman like her in her world. And so what she is up against is this battle to try to fit into all of these overlapping networks of people who are talking to each other about her, who have various levels of power. She has African Americans on one side, white allies on the other, and they're all talking to each other about her. And she's got to operate within that context. And that's a reminder to us of just how complex those kinds of relationships were between even the most well-intentioned whites of this time period and the black people that they were working with. And so I really have come to not feel that I know Abby, Agnes, Anna, whatever her real name was, but I've come to respect her a great deal. She was about 10 to 15 years ahead of her time, because all of the things she was trying to do would not take place for another decade. So I'll leave you with A. Wells Henderson and the enigma that she is, but a reminder of just these complicated intersecting networks of power that operate along the axes of not just professional qualifications, but also race and gender. And thank you very much.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. We have time for questions, comments.
So, obviously, the intersections of race and gender affected professionalism. Then, to what extent do you see that the trickle-down effects of that today? To what extent do you still see those, and can they still be found in letters like these?
Oh, letters that we're exchanging today?
Letters, emails, our modern-day equivalent.
Well, sure. We will tomorrow celebrate, if you will, commemorate Equal Pay Day, right? This is, because women still are not, as a group, women are not paid the same levels as men. And by the way, this takes effect a year after you graduate from college. And even when you control for all other factors. For non-white women, the numbers are much worse in terms of equal pay. So yes, it still happens today. And I think you still also see this, well, you probably just could observe it right on this campus where we're preparing you to go out into professional worlds. And some fields are heavily gendered in one direction or another. Power structures, who makes it all the way to the top, who doesn't. Yeah, yes, I think you still see it trickling forward. Yeah.
As a historian, how do you go about analyzing the correspondence record that you have to determine what actually happened in the time? What were the actual course of events? What were these people like? Because within the correspondence, as you've stated multiple times, these people are writing with a bias, with an agenda of, I want this person to think this way of me. So how do you go about comparing those to actually try and determine what was there?
It's really tough, and I've read through Wells Henderson's correspondence in multiple collections, and sort of I've been able to triangulate that. So her correspondence with Clinton Calloway at Tuskegee, her correspondence with Lambert in the state records, and then it's just reading a lot of other letters by other teachers and people writing to those other teachers. But then one of the things I did have to do was to sort of collect all of this together and just organize these letters and pieces of correspondence just chronologically, and so that I could find where you were looking at the same event and getting different perspectives, and then tracking people down. Ancestry.com is my friend, because I've had to track all of these people down and pinpoint them to make sure that they are the people that I think they are, to try to get a hold of their perspective. So it's really, I'm not convinced that I've achieved the final understanding of that. I would love to have more letters to fill in some of the gaps. But it's that triangulation process that has helped me to figure that out.
What did she do when she was kicked out in 1923?
Initially, she went back to being a county genes teacher in Sumter County, and then she became just a regular teacher, classroom teacher. Because of her college degree, she had a lifetime teaching certificate or license. So she became a teacher, and then she just sort of disappears, and she died in Alabama in 1946. And so that's one of my next projects, is try to figure out what happens in some of those years. I would still love to know more about her time at Wilberforce as a student. I know a little bit about the curriculum there and been able to track some of that, and who she would have been in class with, who went on to become leaders and educators elsewhere. It's fascinating. And I'd love to get into AME church records to track her and Cook as well. I don't have any idea what happened between them.
So is this part of a larger project that you're working on?
Yes.
What does it look like?
Right now, sort of a mess. It's been a very slow project, but and there's been a lot of other work on Jean's teachers, period, and on some other state supervisors who are always, the ones who succeeded. And they could keep the mask on and not show other people what they were thinking and feeling and sort of make their way through these very tortuous channels. As Henderson could not. That's why I think she tells us when you can't make it, how bad those obstacles are. So I'm interested in these state gene supervisors, and in Alabama, tracking them from the very first, who was Hattie Huckabee, who operated out of Birmingham, all the way through Dr. Robert C. Hatch. So their last state gene supervisor was a man. And I'm anxious, he's one of my next projects. His papers are at Howard University. So. But I'm looking at that professional identity and how, because the genes teachers continued until desegregation. And they were very conflicted about what was then going to be happening in public schools.
So this is one piece of the large...
She's one piece. Yeah, she would be one chapter, within that. Right, right.
Good.
Tracing them in the changing context of what they do.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Any other questions, comments? All right, let's thank our speaker.